Em ơi, anh có chút tiền đây, giữ lấy để
Anh thật tốt dụng đã dành cho em.
không có chi.
Nó giúp được rất nhiều, em mang ơn anh.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is about Tieu Hue, a hardworking young woman whose life suddenly turns upside down when her younger brother falls into gambling and accumulates a huge debt. With creditors constantly coming to their house and threatening her family, Hue feels completely helpless and doesn't know how to save her loved ones from this terrible situation. Just when everything seems hopeless, Tuan unexpectedly steps in and gives her a large amount of money so she can pay off the debt and protect her family. Although the crisis is solved, a new pressure begins for Tieu Hue. Tuan often comes to see her and reminds her about repaying the money. While Hue feels grateful for his help, she also works tirelessly every day on the farm, determined to return every dong he lent her. As time passes, their meetings become more frequent, and Tieu Hue slowly starts to realize that Tuan's concern for her might be more than just about the debt. Will Tieu Hue be able to repay the money? And could this difficult situation bring the two of them closer together? If you enjoy emotional stories about love, family, and life's unexpected turns, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this touching story. Thank you so much for watching.
Tieu Hue had never imagined that her life would one day fall into such a painful and complicated situation. For years, she had worked quietly and diligently, helping her family and trying to build a simple, peaceful life. But everything began to collapse when her younger brother became addicted to gambling. What started as small bets with friends slowly turned into a dangerous habit. Before anyone in the family realized how serious it had become, he had already lost a huge amount of money. At first, her brother tried to hide the truth. He told the family that everything was fine, pretending that he could solve the problem by himself. But gambling debts grow quickly, and the people he owed money to were not patient. Soon, strangers began appearing near their home, asking questions and leaving threatening messages. The pressure became heavier every day. Tieu Hue could see the fear in her brother's eyes, and eventually the truth finally came out. The amount of money he owed was far beyond anything their family could afford. That night, Tieu Hue could hardly sleep. She sat quietly in the small room of the farmhouse, thinking about what to do next. Her parents were already old and had spent their entire lives working hard just to keep the family stable. If they found out the full extent of the debt, it would break their hearts. Hue felt as if the entire burden had fallen onto her shoulders. She tried to think of every possible solution, borrowing money from relatives, selling their land, or working multiple jobs, but none of those options could cover such a large amount in such a short time. The following days were filled with anxiety and fear. The creditors began visiting more frequently. Sometimes they would stand outside the gate. Sometimes they would knock loudly on the door, demanding to speak with her brother. Their voices were harsh and impatient. Each time Hue heard those knocks, her heart would race. She worried not only about the money, but also about the safety of her family. The peaceful life they once had suddenly felt very fragile. Just when Tieu Hue felt completely hopeless, someone unexpected stepped into her life at the most critical moment. That person was Tuan. He had known Hue for some time and had always admired her hard-working and kind nature. When he heard about the trouble her family was facing, he did not hesitate for long. One afternoon, he asked Hue to meet him and calmly placed a thick envelope on the table in front of her. Inside was a large amount of money, enough to pay off her brother's gambling debt. For a moment, Tieu Hue could not even speak. Her hands trembled as she looked at the money, then back at Tuan. She asked him why he would do something so generous for her.
Tuan simply smiled and said that sometimes people need help when life becomes too difficult, and he believed she deserved a chance to protect her family. In that moment, tears filled Hui's eyes. To her, that money was not just a financial solution, it was a lifeline that saved her family from a terrible crisis. The heavy weight on her heart suddenly felt lighter, and for the first time in many days, she felt a small spark of hope returning to her life. After receiving Tuan's help, Tieu Hue felt a mixture of relief and deep gratitude that was difficult to put into words. The heavy pressure that had been hanging over her family for days finally began to fade. Thanks to the money Tuan gave her, she was able to settle her younger brother's gambling debt before the situation became even worse. The creditors stopped coming to the house, and the tense atmosphere that once surrounded the small farmhouse slowly disappeared. For the first time in a long while, Tieu Hue could breathe more easily. However, even though the immediate crisis had passed, Tieu Hue knew that the story was far from over. The money Tuan gave her was not a small amount. It was a huge responsibility that she now carried in her heart. Tieu Hue understood clearly that Tuan had trusted her enough to lend her that money, and she did not want to disappoint him. From that day on, she promised herself that she would work harder than ever before to repay every single dong. Her days became even busier. Early in the morning, Tieu Hue would wake up before sunrise to start her work around the farm. She took care of the animals, cleaned the yard, and helped manage the small fields. After that, she continued with other tasks throughout the day, doing whatever work she could find to earn extra money. Even when her body felt tired, Tieu Hue rarely complained. In her mind, she kept reminding herself that she had a debt to repay and a promise to keep. But something else began to happen after Tuan helped her. From time to time, he would come to see her, usually without warning. Sometimes he would appear near the farm gate. Other times he would call her and ask to meet for a short conversation. Each time he came, Tuan would gently remind Tieu Hue about the money he had lent her. He never shouted or spoke harshly, but his words were always clear. He expected the debt to be repaid. For Tieu Hue, those meetings brought complicated emotions. On one hand, she felt sincere gratitude toward Tuan. Without his help, her family might still be trapped in fear and danger. She respected him for stepping in during the most difficult moment of her life. But on the other hand, every time he mentioned the debt, Tieu Hue felt a quiet pressure building inside her chest. Sometimes, when she saw Tuan walking toward the farmhouse from a distance, her heart would start beating faster. She would quickly wipe her hands on her clothes, take a deep breath, and go out to greet him. She tried her best to remain calm and polite, even though she knew the conversation might once again turn to the subject of repayment. Still, Tieu Hue never avoided him. She believed that facing the responsibility was the only right thing to do. Whenever Tuan asked about the progress of her repayment, she would honestly explain her situation and assure him that she was doing everything she could. She did not want him to think that his kindness had been wasted. Even with the pressure and the constant reminders, Tieu Hue's gratitude toward Tuan never faded. Deep in her heart, she knew that very few people would have been willing to help her the way he did. That realization gave her even more determination to keep moving forward. No matter how difficult the days became, she was determined to repay the debt and prove that Tuan had placed his trust in the right person. Even though the debt still weighed heavily on her mind, Tieu Hue never allowed herself to forget how much Tuan had helped her during the darkest moment of her life. Every time she remembered the fear and helplessness her family had felt when the creditors kept coming to their house, she felt an even deeper sense of gratitude toward him. Without Tuan's support, the situation might have turned into a disaster that destroyed her family's peace forever. Because of that, Tuan always treated him with sincere respect and appreciation whenever they met. Still, there were moments when Tuan's unexpected visits made her nervous. Sometimes he would appear near the entrance of the farm in the late afternoon, just when the sun was beginning to set behind the fields. Other times, he would arrive early in the morning while Tuan was busy feeding the animals or cleaning the yard. Whenever she noticed his familiar figure approaching from a distance, her heart would instinctively tighten for a brief moment. It was not because she disliked him. In fact, Tuan respected Tuan deeply, but she knew that his visits often meant another reminder about the money she owed. Even though he never spoke harshly, the topic of the debt always made her feel a quiet pressure. She worried that she was not earning money fast enough to repay him as quickly as she wished. Each time Tuan came, Tuan would pause her work and walk over to greet him politely. Sometimes they would stand near the wooden fence of the farm and talk for a few minutes. Tuan would ask simple questions about her work, about the farm, or about how her family was doing. His tone was usually calm and steady, but sooner or later, the conversation would return to the subject of the loan. Tuan always answered honestly. She would explain how she had been working longer hours, taking on extra responsibilities, and saving every bit of money she could. She never tried to avoid the topic, because she believed that responsibility was something she had to face with courage. Even when the pressure felt heavy, she kept reminding herself that Tuan had trusted her, and she had to honor that trust. Over time, something inside Tuan's heart slowly began to change. The more she interacted with Tuan, the more she noticed small details about him that she had not paid attention to before. Despite his constant reminders about the debt, he never treated her with disrespect. He never humiliated her in front of others or raised his voice. In fact, there were times when he quietly asked if she was taking care of herself and not working too hard. Those small moments left a strange warmth in Tuan's heart. She started to wonder whether Tuan's repeated visits were truly only about the money. Sometimes his eyes seemed to carry a deeper concern when he looked at her, as if he cared about more than just repayment. Standing alone in the quiet evening after another long day of work, Tieu Hue often thought about these things. She knew she still had a long journey ahead before she could fully repay the debt, but deep in her heart, she also began to realize that Tuan's presence in her life might mean something more than a simple financial obligation. And perhaps, without even realizing it, the connection between them was slowly growing into something far more meaningful than either of them had expected.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Tieu Hue Life. Vậy là câu chuyện của chúng ta ngày hôm nay đã kết thúc tại đây. Trong câu chuyện hôm nay của chúng ta thì đã kể về nội dung đó chính là việc vị CEO trẻ, CEO Tuấn đã giúp Tiểu Huế một số tiền rất là lớn để Tiểu Huế có thể trả nợ giúp em trai của mình khi mà anh ta bị vướng vào vòng nợ nần vì cờ bạc. Tiểu Huế cảm thấy rất là biết ơn vị CEO trẻ luôn giang tay giúp đỡ cô trong lúc khó khăn nhất trong cuộc sống, và lần này vị CEO trẻ, CEO Tuấn lại lại giúp đỡ được cả em trai cô, giúp cho em trai cô thoát khỏi vòng nợ nần. Ờ, nên Tiểu Huế cảm thấy biết ơn CEO Tuấn rất là nhiều. Cô nguyện sẽ cả đời này sẽ ở bên CEO Tuấn nếu có thể. Mọi tình tiết hấp dẫn của câu chuyện Tiểu Huế và CEO Tuấn sẽ còn được kể ở các video tiếp theo. Các bạn đừng quên bấm vào nút đăng ký kênh sẽ nhận được thông báo mới nhất về các câu chuyện sẽ được phát sóng hàng ngày trên kênh Tiểu Huế Live nhé. Tiểu Huế và CEO Tuấn cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều. Bye bye.